Good afternoon and welcome to MFAN's latest Resource Connection webinar, PCS Prep, Home Sweet Temporary Home. This time of year, we know that a lot of military families are dealing with tight rental markets and limited base housing opportunities. So many families are considering purchasing a home, possibly for the first time. But military home buying comes with its own unique set of challenges. From knowing where to purchase a home at a new duty station to what do you do with that house when you get the next set of PCS orders. Fortunately, today we are joined by two experts from our MFAN Advisory Board Alumni Program, Erin Ward and Kellie Artis, to help give us some information and important resources to help military families make the best decision for them. So I'd love to get started today by giving you both an opportunity to introduce yourselves. Kellie, why don't we get started with you?
Hey, Erin and Erin. Thanks so much for having me today. So excited to be here with you guys. So my name is Kellie Artis. I am a two-term alumna of the MFAN Advisory Board and also the COO of a company called MILLIE. And our primary focus is bringing military families home. And what that looks like is just helping provide some resources, service providers, and community around relocating and the PCS lifestyle that we often encounter. So thanks again for having me.
And Erin?
Yeah, so I was actually on the original MFAN alumni board way back in the day and had the really big honor of being a board member as well for quite some time. But now I spend a lot of my time as the CEO of HRVA Homes in the Hampton Roads area. So pretty big military pocket here. And so our biggest focus is actually on helping military families and leveraging their VA loans to build wealth. And, coming into the community and really learning a lot, like Kellie was referencing, really getting comfortable within the community and knowing the different places to live, different amenities out there, those kind of things. That's a huge focus for us.
That's great. We appreciate you guys being here with us today so much. We know that you are both very busy. We know that our viewers are very busy. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it. If you are a military family, you're thinking about buying a home, what is the absolute first thing that you should do? Erin, let's start with you.
Oh, man. Yeah, I think the very first thing you need to do is connect with a military affiliated real estate agent, right? Somebody that's really going to get where you're coming from, right? Understands the stresses of the PCS, right? Like that's such a big deal. There's so much that goes into moving, even beyond finding a home, that finding and connecting with somebody that understands that, has been through that maybe themselves, and has experience in helping people make those moves a little less stressful, I think is the number one thing. And that real estate agent generally at that point can really connect you in with the other pieces and parts and the people that you need along the journey and along the way, such as military affiliated lenders, military affiliated home inspectors, and just the whole team you really have to put together to have a successful, home buying experience or relocation, or even if you're looking at the rental market, right? Having somebody who truly understands all of that you're going through in a PCS, and we PCS a lot ourselves personally, really having that knowledge and that understanding of what's really important to you, right? What are the things you need to have, ready to go and hit the ground running, schools, church, soccer, baseball, all those things that you need. Where are the libraries? All the things that you really need to hit the ground running. Military affiliated real estate agents, I think, should be your first stop.
That is great advice, Erin. Kellie, I'll kind of bounce things over to you now, because as Erin was mentioning, it's knowing those neighborhoods, it's knowing those schools and resources. And I know MILLIE does a great job of helping connecting families with that type of information.
Yeah, it's so important. The deal is like we have a really compressed timeline. Often we get orders and don't frequently have the opportunity to spend months and weeks and all of this extra spare time planning out our path. We're kind of always in reaction mode and just moving, trying to get things done. So one really, really easy thing that everyone can do, no matter where they're at in that PCS cycle, that timeline, right? Maybe this is not a PCS year for you, One thing that I would love to suggest is people get really serious about like an assessment of their family, right? Erin just touched on it, knowing the types of things that you're going to be looking for, no matter where you get stationed, and kind of having those necessities, those amenities, those values as like anchor points can help you so much going forward for that initial conversation when you talk to your agent or your military savvy professional who's going to be helping you make decisions locally, right? Is understanding what the things are that you need. Now, when it gets to the point where you do need to start researching and finding those anchor points at specific duty stations, getting kind of a handle on the landscape of online research, right? Like, where do you even go to look up these things? Where do you go to start getting the lay of the land, so to speak? So that can be overwhelming really quickly. It's kind of like the world is at your fingertips, literally, with technology and with the internet, which is great in a lot of aspects. But then also it's really hard to kind of get focused and zero in on the things that you are specifically looking for. So again, having that knowledge, that assessment of your family, of your home needs. And home could look like any variety of things, to include campers, right? I mean, people are getting really creative with the ways in which they shelter themselves and their families. But if you know those things off the bat, that's going to just really help. So I would encourage everyone, even if a PCS isn't pending this year, right? Go ahead and start sort of a dream sheet or maybe like a value sheet of the things that are important to you and your pattern of life. It's going to really help advance the conversation when you meet with folks who are going to be helping you make those decisions.
Kelly, I love that idea of the family assessment. You know, we were talking earlier, my family just purchased our first home in Virginia. And one of the things that we knew right away was going to be important to us was how close we were going to be to the pool, because I have three
Yeah,
competitive swimmers. Y'all would not believe how much time I spend poolside these days with 3 kids in there. So
yep,
definitely that is a great point to have our families think about what are their needs, and then connecting with that local realtor to help them figure out exactly what the right area to meet all those needs are. So
totally.
that is a great suggestion. Erin, you mentioned VA loans when you were talking earlier. Can you just talk a little bit more about what VA loans are, how they qualify, and why they are such a great benefit for military families?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to put it, obviously, I work in the industry, but I would have to put it as one of the best benefits, earned benefits that you get as a military family and service member. And, so the government has come out and said, hey, generally, when you go to buy a house, you're putting anywhere from 3 to 25% down payment down. And that's usually because lenders who are loaning you a ton of money want you to put some skin in the game, right? So the data shows that when you have skin in the game, you're less likely to default on your loan or file bankruptcy or foreclose on the property, right? So what the VA has come in and said is we'll stand in the gap of that, right? We will become that down payment essentially. And so instead of having to make a 3 to 25% down payment, service members with VA eligibility can actually purchase a home with no down payment, which is a tremendous option, right? I don't know. For a lot of folks who, especially people who PCS a lot, it's very costly. So saving money for a 3 to 5% or 20% or 25% down payment can be really, really tough. And it's a barrier to home ownership, I think, a lot of times. And so especially as we move so much, having this VA, eligibility and loan option available is huge. I mean, because now we can get in, buy a home for 0 down. It's not no money, right? Let's be very clear. There are still costs associated with purchasing a property, right? But not only that, it gives the ability for a service member to also start leveraging that VA loan, that earned benefit, to build wealth, because there is no better wealth vehicle in this country, especially recently with inflation and different things that we've seen, than real estate, right? So if you look at most millionaires and very wealthy individuals and even wealthy companies, they're building their wealth through actual property ownership. And so I think it levels the playing field so that our military families also have the opportunity to start doing that as well. And it's a huge win. It is a huge win to be able to get into, especially these high price markets and still be able to use a 0 down payment loan option through the VA.
Erin, just want to pull the thread a little bit more on something you just said, where you mentioned, even if you're using a VA loan, it's not no cost. There are a variety of costs affiliated with buying
Yeah.
your first home or any home, really. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And, if there's kind of a magic number, if that even exists for someone to say, I need to have this much money in the bank before I can feel like I'm comfortably ready to purchase my first home?
You know, that's such a great question because it actually changes from location to location, right? So there's what we consider like customary fees, right? And they're location based. So in my area, they're pretty low. From what I understand in other markets, in my experience in other markets. So just in my area, in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, they're fairly low, right? We have an earnest money deposit that's typically expected. And that deposit, I think, often has different names in different locations. However, it's a pretty customary and usual fee that you'll see across the board. And generally, that's a fee that says to the sellers, hey, I'm serious about purchasing your property. And while I pursue purchasing your property, I want you to kind of remove it from the market in a sense so nobody else can pursue it, but I'm serious about it. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is so that I'm serious. Now, typically in most areas, this type of deposit comes back to you, right? As long as you adhere to the contract, you follow the rules of the contract, it comes back to you. It goes towards what we're going to talk about is your closing costs, right? So it usually gets applied in that arena. Now, in other markets, there are different things, right? In North Carolina, there's often things like option fees in addition to earnest money deposits. Same thing in different areas, right? You have escrow fees and things like that. So there are different fees in different markets. So it's important to, again, connect with a real estate professional in that market to get that specific information for that market. But then after that, you're gonna, don't buy a house without having a home inspection, right? So find out what the usual fees are for a home inspection. In our market, they're about $550 on average. It depends on the size of the home, the age of the home. If the home is on a basement, a crawl space, or slab on the ground, those things can adjust the home inspection costs, right? You often have to have in most states a termite inspection, sometimes a termite moisture inspection, right? So those can often be paid by the seller, right? But in some states they don't have to be. The VA, this is kind of a confusing thing, but the VA does not dictate who has to pay for that particular inspection. So you do have the option to pay that. And then finally, you have the closing costs, right? And so there's a lot of confusion around what's included for closing costs. So because a couple of years ago, right, in a lot of markets, you could get the sellers to pay your closing costs. That doesn't necessarily always happen. Most markets are still in a seller's market right now. And so part of your closing costs include a VA funding fee, right? And that VA funding fee on the first time use is fairly low. But that is the only closing costs that is allowed to be wrapped up into your loan. So for example, if you're purchasing a home at 300,000, you may see that your loan amount is actually 309. There's a magic number to it, but anyway, $309,000 approximately, right? And so that is because you've rolled your funding fee up into the loan. Now there's other costs associated with it, right? So usually you have a closing attorney or title company. They're going to charge you to, do all the paperwork, record the deed. Most states have, or most locations have recording fees, right? Deed prep, title prep. There's a lot of locality fees involved. Generally, you have to pay the first year of insurance up front, right? So some of that stuff gets funded, all added up. And so it will depend on location what that magic percentage, right, on average usually is. In our location, it's 3% generally. So, and same thing also included in there, if you're working with a lender who charges lender fees, you'll see that added in that 3% price range too. So
again, I think it just really points to your point earlier, finding an experienced realtor who knows military moves, finding a lender that knows VA loans, like those are kind of the two first things you really need to do when you start thinking about purchasing a home.
100%. And I think, they should be having the conversation with you too, find a real estate agent who's going to do a buyer consultation. So I think, the exciting thing is always getting out and finding a house, but don't skip the buyer consultation. Even if you've bought 100 homes before and you're going to a new market or the market has changed since the last time you bought a house, you should expect that real estate agent that you're working with to sit down with you, go through the process one more time, right? At a minimum, break down these costs for you in that given market, right? But also describe what's happening in that market to you, right? So in our market, in most cases, we're in a seller's market, but you could go down the road, a couple of hours and maybe they're shifting into a buyer's market, but you really have to really have somebody who's got a pulse on the market and is willing to give you the education for that. So, that military background and that military knowledge is great, but also finding somebody that's really going to take the time to educate you throughout the process. And you've never bought enough houses to be overeducated. Like, I can just tell you, like, I have clients who have bought, multiple homes and still they're like, nobody told us this stuff before, so it's so super valuable to have that time.
To beleaguer the point, and from the buyers or sellers perspective, like, I'm not an agent, right? But one thing that we push heavily to anyone that we work with or, try to help is, like, not only are you assessing yourself, you're assessing these professionals that you're going to be working with. So you guys don't be afraid to, like, interview all of the professionals that you may be working. Yeah, Erin, right? Like, what are the questions that you should be asking your real estate agent who says, I'm military friendly, or, whatever they're saying very well could be true. But when it comes right down to it, how do you feel about the VA loan? Like, right, you can ask simple questions and get some flags can start to come up. And if you feel any kind of way, like, maybe broaden your search a little bit, interview multiple people, find a good fit. This is a big transaction. It is stressful. Even under the best of circumstances, things go wrong, right? So you definitely need somebody that you're a good fit with, that is going to advocate for you, that is going to educate you and the agents that you'll be working with on the other side of the transaction. Sometimes it takes a little bit of education in that way too, because you don't always pick your agent that you're working on, the other side of the anyway, all that to say, like, don't be afraid to interview folks. This is a decision that you're making with a lot of money behind it. So you deserve answers.
Yeah. You're 100% right. I actually love to be interviewed, which probably sounds, I mean, don't get me wrong. I like it when people come out and just choose me. Hey, like, that's, I'm not going to lie about that, but I also love the interview aspect of it, right? Because it lets me do what I'm really good at, right? And that is connecting with people. And I think, the one thing sometimes in the real estate industry that maybe doesn't come through is this is a relationship business. Right? This is a journey that we're going on together. And if you're not feeling that from me, and the partners that I work with, that's not good. Right? Like, I want you to have the best possible experience. And that's one of the reasons I got into the business, right? Was because I didn't have a great real estate experience. I didn't know all these things, right? Like, I was a civilian to the real estate world at the time, right? So I didn't know all these things prior to. So I just thought, the lender I was working with said, if you work with this person, we'll give you some money and credit it back. And I thought that was the greatest thing that could ever happen. And I just thought that's what you did. And it was a well-known, everybody had heard of it. And so it was like, this is what I'm going to do. And it wasn't a great experience. It really wasn't. And to be honest with you, knowing what I know now, it probably really wasn't, I didn't even get that much money, so right. At the end of the day, I wish I had taken more time to interview more people. I probably would have had a better overall experience. And I probably would have learned a heck of a lot more, because I didn't know everything until I became a real estate agent. I was so clueless, which is totally normal. You should be, unless you're in the market or in the industry.
Yep.
Kellie, I think that I always think about with Millie is you guys have those great guides on your website that people can download for free. What are some of the guides that, if you are a military home buyer, that you can download from Millie to kind of access?
Yeah, thanks for that. So we have a library of toolkits, essentially, that kind of lays out exactly what we're talking about here. Not particularly telling you who to work with necessarily, but telling you how to make informed decisions, right? How to research things on your own, right? So we have a toolkit for first-time home buyers, which is probably one of the most popular ones, because it's all the questions that, like, you kind of just feel like you're supposed to know, like, as a grown-up, I'm buying a house, I should know this, and you're embarrassed to ask, right? There's no such thing as a dumb question. Like Erin said, like, you're always learning. Even if you're in the industry, you're always learning, and you're also paying professionals to do all of this really hard work for you. So you don't have to know everything. So ask the question. So we lay out kind of the roadmap. It talks about that pattern of life that I mentioned earlier, how to map that out. Actually, there's a worksheet in it that can help you with that. You mentioned swimming pools. We have a lot of folks who talk about, like, I need to be close to a Target. And that's a priority, and that's okay. So like, let's put Target on the map. Where is it? Where's the zone there? Another really helpful toolkit that I think that I am a huge fan of is our school scope toolkit. So understanding the school situations at every different duty station or at any duty station is just tricky. It's hard, and there are definitely some ethical concerns too around the types of questions you should or should not be asking, or how maybe even some of the evaluative websites work and come up with their grades or their scores. So our school scope toolkit actually breaks down like how to do that evaluation yourself, right? Instead of just taking someone else's word for it, right? How to sort of create a composite of all of the different types of ranking systems to give yourself a more informed view, but then beyond that, even to go to sites like the Department of Education and read the state report cards for each school, and then also introducing a ton of other resources like the Military Child Education Coalition that I know you guys work well with, just to help kind of bring you up to speed on the actual districts that you're going to be moving to, because that should be driving some of your home buying choices. You need to get a full lay of the land before you make an investment about where you're going to live and where your family will live and grow and hopefully thrive for the next 2, 3, or more years. We also have a toolkit on the VA loan. It's very high level. You definitely still need the professionals that we're talking about to help guide you. But if you just wanted some high level hits on, how the VA loan actually works, right? Like, what is this? Like even Erin was talking about earlier, it's the VA saying, you know what, we're gonna front some of this money for you. We're gonna say like, we got you, right? What does that mean? It just gets really nuanced, but so we have a toolkit for that as well, and then several others that you're welcome to go browse. They're all free, obviously. Just go grab yourself a toolkit and then ask us questions if you have any. We're happy to point you to all the professionals that we know, like, and trust, that you could work with to make this a good experience for you.
I know for a lot of our military families, we titled this webinar Home Sweet Temporary Home because you might be in a situation where you're looking at buying a home that's not going to be your forever home. And so if you're buying that home and you know that you're likely to get orders in maybe 2 or 3 years, is purchasing a home a smart decision? And then what do you do with it when you get that next set of orders and now you have this home? How do you make that decision?
I think that's one of my favorite things to talk about, right? Because I'm a huge advocate in buying, even if you're here 2 to 3 years. But I think what's really, really important is making sure you understand the data around where you're buying, right? So our focus is in looking at the average appreciation in those markets. And now because we do it so often and so much, and that's just basically how, I'm constantly looking at that for the different areas, and we have a huge geographical area that we serve here. But we want to also educate our clients on that too. So we show them how to pull that information to see what the average appreciation is in that area. So are you buying in a place that if you need to sell it in 2 to 3 years, you're going to be okay, right? In a typical market. So we don't look at the last 2 to 3 years, right? Like that's an anomaly. We look at what the average appreciation is in a typical market, right? Which a typical market, by the way, is considered a buyer's market. We still aren't there. It's not happening in most places in the country, right? But we're still looking at what it looks like in a buyer's market because that's the slower end of appreciation for sellers, right? So now we're being very, responsible when we're looking, but we're also looking at the average appreciation for the rent amounts in those areas, which in most military areas right now, I think we all know are skyrocketing, right? As we battle this, housing allowance situation and things like that. So we want to make sure that, whatever your decision is at the end of the day, my ultimate goal and my love is that you buy and hold, right? So you buy a property, you hold it as an investment property. If you're there for 3 years, then the next 27 years, we're going to help you figure out how you're going to get somebody else to pay that mortgage. If you're active duty, Uncle Sam's been paying it through your housing allowance entitlement, but then the next 27 years, somebody else is going to be paying that so that you build that wealth over time, right? So the goal is to replace income for retirement through cash flow on your investment property. right? So that's one of my favorite things. But so we need to make sure it'll do both, right? To protect you as a service member. And again, that's one of the questions you should be asking when you're interviewing professionals, right? Like, how do you protect me from that? How do I know? Because we often meet with people still that go to sell now that purchased a property in a place that hasn't even appreciated in the seller's market. So it becomes really difficult for us to help them sell or even rent those properties because of that, so that's always our goal. I mean, I meet with people every day who say, I don't want to be a landlord, but I'm still going to teach you how to protect yourself and insulate this investment that you're able to make right now. And I think it's incredibly important. So I would tell everybody to make sure they still buy if they're going to move every 2 to 3 years. There's great ways to do that and really build wealth.
That's great. Kellie, anything to add there? Those MILLIE toolkits always come in handy.
Yeah, we do. Well, so yeah, again, with the awareness piece, right? Again, with the being really brutally honest with yourself. If you're going to live in a place for 2 to 3 years, so have an honest conversation with your service member together as a family. Like, okay, what does the trajectory look like here? Are we in a location where we could be here longer? Could be here shorter? Could we come back here at some point? Right? I know it's completely unrealistic to think that that could be predictable in any way, shape, or form. However, you can maybe have an idea of the fact of, a duty station that you will probably go and never, ever come back to. Okay, cool. That's a data point, right? That's something that you need to consider. Why are you purchasing a house? Is it because there are no other options and you're feeling like kind of like that's the only option? Okay, then let's get really realistic about what we're even buying here. Do we need to buy the dream house, or do we need to maybe buy something that'll be a good rental? Maybe that's not what you want to live in, but it's where it's going to make the most sense as an investment, right? Almost like think of it as a business, right? You almost can't get emotionally attached. You need to make the house a home, right? While you're there, you owe that to yourself, to your family. But I would caution against getting too emotionally connected to any of these decisions, especially these purchases. We just, as a personal anecdote, we had a small little bungalow here in Fayetteville that both my babies were born in. I got emotionally attached to that house. We ended up trying to rent it, and we rented it successfully, but I was really not a good landlord because I was emotionally connected to that house. And every little scratch and ding and thing that was broken, I got like really upset about. You can't do that. So you got to be honest with yourself. Like, do you get too sentimental about things, right? Can you detach from the house and make it a property that you can manage as a landlord? Do you have it in you to be a landlord? Because even if you have a management company, it's still your house. You still own the house, and you still have to actively manage it at some level. So just, again, being really honest with yourself about the why and the skill sets, right, that you have as to whether or not it'll be a good situation for you. And then to bring all of that full circle, we do have a military landlord toolkit if you wanted to dip your toes in, and just to kind of give you the honest realities of what it actually takes and looks like to either self-manage or to own a property and manage it from far away with the help of a management company.
Kellie, you bring up such a great point. Maybe this is a duty station you are never, ever coming back to. Maybe you are the type of person that gets so attached, and being a landlord just isn't right for you. So if you are going to move forward with a rental, what are some of the things that you can do when you're trying to find a rental home, again, in a market that might be across the country that you have never been to before? How do you make those decisions as a renter, and what protections are in place for you?
I can speak a little bit onto like the direction as to like how to start researching that and what kind of assets you have. And I would love for Erin to touch on like with the actual professional side of that, because I know there are a ton of agents who can help you with rentals. The reality is, in a lot of markets that doesn't exist. So you're kind of on your own. It's like the Wild West out there. So assuming you're moving to a place that is the Wild West and you're on your own finding a rental, you're scouring want ads. You guys, back in the day, there used to be these things called newspapers that had like classifieds, and that's how now it's you go on different sites and websites and find rentals. I would just say once you've got the lay of the land, so you do still need to do the same initial research that we talked about for purchasing a house. You need to triangulate where you're going to live. Where do you want to live? What zip code do you want to live in, right? What school district do you want to be in? So you kind of have to start there, and then determine what your non-negotiables are as a family. Like what are your needs? What are your wants, right? And what can you do without? And you start figuring out what that looks like as a tenant or as a renter there. You want to try to look at your BAH at that duty station, try to find rent that's below BAH is always the best advice to give. Whatever BAH is intended to cover or not cover, that's the money you get that you should be allocating towards housing. So try to come in under it if you can. That may mean sacrificing in some ways. That might mean a longer commute. That may mean less square footage, right? Understand that there are likely going to be sacrifices in this equation, and just determine what the priorities are for you. I would also say that the interview your people still applies here. If you're going to be working, if you're renting from a management company, cool, go look at their reviews, go look at the Better Business Bureau, see what kind of reputation they have as a management company. How do they treat their tenants? How do they treat their homeowners, right? Those are all going to be really key indicators, especially when things go wrong or when things break. That's who you're turning to be able to help rectify these situations. So you need to make sure that you're working with people that you can trust. If it's a self-managing situation where it's a homeowner who's managing the property themselves, I would highly recommend having a conversation with that person and interviewing them. How long have they been a landlord? How many tenants have they had? Have they ever evicted anyone? What kind of problems do they encounter? And again, pick up the phone and have an actual live audible conversation, and you can learn a lot about whether it's going to be a good fit, right? If you're going to get along well with that person. So all of these things, again, these are data points in the front side of the decision to help you make informed decisions. And then once you're in the property, you've signed the lease, you also have some protections there. Actually, I'll kick this one over to Erin if you want to touch on or add to.
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to a state by state case again. So every state has their own landlord tenant laws. So I think definitely connecting with a professional in the location that you're going to is going to be a huge win. If you're renting sight unseen, for sure, you need to know, hey, if we, first of all, make sure you're not the person that you're paying a deposit to actually owns the property. There's a lot of scams out there that is huge. And a real estate agent should, whether they're showing you the property or not, should be able to help you verify that at a minimum. But I mean, I think it's a good time to talk about or talk with a real estate agent about what the protections are in that state, right? So states like California have pretty good protections for people on sight unseen rentals and purchases, whereas Virginia does not as much, right? So once you sign that lease, put that deposit in, with the exception of, and this is just a very recent change that I think does not go into effect until 2024. If the property is uninhabitable, right, early on in the beginning in the state of Virginia, you're able to then walk away from that rental. But otherwise, if you just walked up and didn't like the area, right, or the location because it was sight unseen, you may be tied to that lease because that is not actually a reason to walk away from the lease. So quite frequently, and Kelly, you talked a little bit about the protection aspect with real estate agents and how difficult it can be sometimes in different locations to find a real estate agent that wants to assist on rentals. Because quite frankly, it's a lot of work. And there's not a lot of pay involved
Right.
with real estate agents finding rentals, right? Yeah. I think in our area, I think it's approximately $100, $150 is what I usually see. And a lot of times we could be showing 20, 30 rental properties, right? And sometimes we can't even get to them fast enough, right? So in my market, I see quite frequently that they're rented so quick, right? Rentals are very, very difficult. The housing situation in our market is pretty tough right now. I would say rentals in most cases are more difficult than purchasing a property sometimes in our market. And so they can go faster than we can get out there, right? So I think a lot of times the real estate agents just don't want to dive in all the time. We still help a lot of especially our military families that are looking for rentals. We still do everything we can to help them find rentals, but it is a very difficult situation to be in, especially when you're sight unseen, right? It's tough. So
Yeah, I was just gonna like add, so you can always definitely call your friends, right? Tap your network, say like, hey, you guys, I'm moving here. Can somebody just drive by this house and make sure it exists? Because Erin's so right. These scams are, just type in military rental scam, you guys. You'll be completely confounded. And you do not want to find yourself in a situation where you've put down money and you can't get it back.
and it happens a lot. It
I do
happens all the time. Yeah,
it really does.
They'll take houses for sale and list
Yeah.
on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace as rentals, and they're not even eligible. They're not rentals, right? So I'll have
Yeah.
people call me upset because they've made a deposit on something that we don't have anything to do with, and it's tough. So you definitely need to do your homework.
Yeah. So if you don't have the network, don't have someone on the other side, I do just want to give a quick plug. We have a network of military spouses who are all just independent contractors. They're not agents or property managers or anything like that. Think like TaskRabbit. You can just hire them to go out and do a quick drive-by, like a safe photographic drive-by of the property, make sure it exists. They can do tours for you. Like they can be the camera for you, right? If you can't be there. So I would definitely encourage everyone to look into that. That is a paid service, but you're paying a military spouse to do you a solid, to save you lots of money on the other side and to keep you
That's
from
one of
making a
my
bad
favorite
decision.
things that you guys do. I think
Thank
it's
you.
a huge value add. I mean,
Yeah.
just from within the industry, it's
Yeah.
so important. And I think we rented for far too long over way too many duty stations. But we didn't have that option. So we
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah, and believe it or not,
Absolutely.
Erin, we have real estate agents who hire Millie Scouts
Yeah.
to go help people with rentals because they want to still help. But the reality is their time is better spent doing other things like selling and buying. So yeah, we definitely love our scouts. They're huge, and they're all military connected. Their spouses themselves who have also PCS'd and been through it. And there's something to be said for like lived experience, you guys. So making sure that you're working with folks who get it is a big deal.
Kellie and Erin, I feel like we could just keep on with this conversation all day long, but I want to be respectful of your time. I want to be respectful of our viewers' time. There has been a lot of information shared today in this webinar. Please don't feel like you need to take notes or scramble to access those links that we've got shared in the comments. We're going to put together a wrap-up blog. There'll be a link to rewatch this webinar, links to the different resources we've discussed today. So we will get that posted on our blog. Please feel free to share it. Watch this webinar again yourself if there's something that you have a question about that you'd like to see us talk about again. But really, thank you both for your time today, for being so willing to share your experience and your expertise with us. I feel like I learned a ton, so I'm sure our viewers out there feel that way as well. And if you are watching us today, please do make sure that you're following MFAN on our social media accounts through Facebook and Instagram and on our website at mfan.org. We are constantly putting out these sorts of resource connection webinars and other resources because we want to make sure that military families like you have the resources you need to meet the challenges you're facing every day and to really thrive in this military lifestyle. Thank you everyone for your time today. We really appreciate you trusting us with your time, and we look forward to connecting with you again. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.